Welcome back to Yarnspirations. I'm your host Brittany, and today I'm so excited to demonstrate how to crochet the Bernat Crochet Baby Cocoon and share my unique little twist to this versatile pattern. Are you ready to crochet a baby cocoon? Let's get started with the written instructions first. The first thing you'll want to do, if you haven't done so already, is go ahead and download your free pattern from yarnspirations.com. I'm going to make a lot of references to this written instruction because my objective for the tutorial isn't necessarily to break down every single step and show you round by round and row by row, but rather pick out the techniques that are within this pattern and help you to translate what you're reading here in the pattern so you can convert that to stitches and then take that knowledge into the next pattern. Once you have your pattern in hand, we're going to focus our attention right here. This is the first instruction that we need to follow to start round number 1. Now it's also important to note that this pattern is worked from bottom up, so we're starting right down here at the bottom edge, and then we're working up. We'll follow through with a hood at the very end. So with that in mind, the first thing we need to do is start round 1, and our instructions to do so are right here. So we're going to chain 4, join with a slip stitch to the first chain to form a ring. Then we're going to make 10 half double crochet in that ring. Of course, don't forget your chain 2, which the pattern also instructs is not counted as a stitch. So you're just going to chain 2 to get that height, and then you're going to make 10 half double crochets in the ring, join with the slip stitch to your first half double crochet. You'll have a total of 10 stitches at that point. And the other thing I would like you to do is follow through with round number 2. These 2 rounds are very easy. They're a setup round, and number 2 is just one solid round of increasing. So you'll notice that we're still going to chain 2, not counting that as a stitch, make 2 half double crochets into every single stitch. We're going to double our stitch count from 10 to 20. So go ahead and work up the first round, the second round, and now let's have a look at how to do round number 3, and we'll tackle those increases. This is what your work will look like after you finish the first 2 rounds, and I wanted to pick up here because round number 3 is where we really start to focus on our increases. So what we want to do is chain 2. So our chain 2 is coming from here, and the instructions do say that we're not counting the chain 2 as a stitch. So we can do this one of a couple different ways. What I like to do is just make my first stitch right here where my chain 2 is coming from. So I'll do the best I can to find that V. Now if you turn it from the top, you can kind of see it pretty clearly there, or you can just feel around. That's typically what I do. I'll feel with the back of my finger here as I insert my hook, and we're going to half double crochet. Then we're going to find our next stitch. Again, looking from the top, we can see the V right there. And we want to make 2 half double crochets in this stitch. And here's where the repeat begins. And this is also where it's going to vary from round to round, just on this initial increased section. So we're going to make 1 half double crochet in the next stitch, 2 half double crochets in the next. And as you're looking at the front of your work, just allow the texture to guide where you put your hook. So I can see that there's an opening there, or that there's a change in texture there. So I know that's my cue, that that's my next stitch. I'm going to make 2 half double crochets in that space. So there's 1 and 2. And then I'm just going to continue that repeat. 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochets. And that's what we're going to do for this particular round. Now let's say you got distracted and you can't remember if you made 1 half double crochet or 2. This is a pretty good representation here. Do you see how it kind of looks like a V right there? That is where there are 2 half double crochets, and this is where there are 1. So that's a little visual cue for you if you get off track. And also keep in mind that as you cover the next few rounds, those increasing rounds, the amount of stitches that you place in between these increases. So when you make 2 half double crochets into one, that's considered an increase. And for now, for round number 3, we're just putting 1 stitch in between the 2 increases. Well, that number is going to increase every round. So on the next one, we're going to put 2 stitches in between the 2 increases, and for the next one, 3, and so on. Now when you get to the end of your round, the last thing we need to do is join with the slip stitch to our first half double crochet. Now if we dissect this a little bit here, this is our chain 2. We're not going to join there, but this post right here, that is my first stitch, and I need to look for the V that's right on top of that. So it would be right here, and it really does look like part of that chain, so you want to be careful. Although if you join in the chain, it's really not going to be the end of the world. And slip stitch. Now at the end of this round, we're going to have a total of 30 stitches, and just know that we're increasing by 10 stitches every single round. So we started with 10, round 2 we had 20, round 3 we had 30, we're going to have 40, 50, and so on. So increasing really isn't that bad, right? All we need to do is realize where we're placing those increases and know the number of stitches that we need to put in between those increases, and that is the gist of the first 6 rounds of this entire pattern. So we finished round number 3 at this point, so we can cross that one off. We'll now need to proceed with rounds 4, 5, and 6. These rounds are simply increasing rounds, and the only difference that we're going to see is in the number of stitches that we place in between those decreases. So we can see it right there. We're going to put 2 in between those increases for round 4. We're going to put 3 in between the increases for round 5. The other thing I want to point out is that on round 4 we'll have a total of 40 stitches. The end of round number 5 we'll have a total of 50. Now just remember, we're only increasing by 10 stitches every single round. Now flipping here to page number 2, the last increasing round we have here is round number 6. Again, the only difference here in the technique is the number of stitches. So we're going to put 4 half double crochets in between our increases, and we're going to end with 60 half double crochets at the end of that round. Now once you've finished all the way through round number 6, what I'd like for you to do is also go ahead and work on the first round. And this is part of our texture pattern, but this one is super simple. All we need to do is make 1 half double crochet into every single stitch. You're a pro at that by now, so we're going to pick up on round number 2 here. And the new technique we're going to add here is talking about these bobble stitches that we see creating this nice bumpy texture throughout the body of the pattern. So this is what your cocoon looks like now after you've finished the entire repeated section and you've done the first round of our texture pattern. And that's just basically where we made 1 half double crochet into every stitch. Now you'll notice here that it's already starting to curve, and that's exactly what we want. The shape is starting to take form. So the first thing we're going to focus on is the stitch pattern repeat, and this is found in round 2 of the texture pattern. We're going to begin by chaining 2. And then we want to half double crochet in the first stitch. We're very familiar with this. And the next stitch we want to create is a bobble. The way we're going to do that is yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, draw up a loop, so yarn over and pull through. Then I want to yarn over and pull through these 2. Then we're going to repeat that 2 more times, so just leave these 2 loops there, yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, draw up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Now leave those 3, yarn over again, insert your hook in the same stitch, and things are going to get a little tight, a little uncomfortable here. Yarn over, pull through 2, and then we're going to finish it off by making a yarn over and pull through all 4 of these loops. Then the next thing we need to do is find our next stitch and work a half double crochet there. And since this half double crochet is a little bit shorter than the other ones it's going to pull that bobble down and it's going to give it a little bit of texture. So what I like to do is just what you see there, just take my finger and kind of push that through. That's really going to exaggerate the texture when you push that out. So that's your stitch pattern repeat. We're going to make a half double crochet and a bobble and repeat that over and over until we get to the end of the round. So let's see that bobble one more time. We're basically just doing that yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. That motion, we're doing that a total of 3 times or until you have 4 loops on your hook. And when that's the case, you'll yarn over, pull through all 4, and then half double crochet in the next. And again, you'll see how the act of that just kind of made so the bobble sort of stuck out the other side. All we have to do is just poke that through and move on. You'll just want to repeat this sequence until you get to the end of your round. When you do, you're going to find your first half double crochet, which is right here. We're going to join with the slip stitch to that stitch, so this chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. So back to our written pattern here, and I recommend that you do this. Get out a pen and mark it up, circle things, cross things out. It really helps you keep track of where you are within the pattern. So we're focusing our attention on this section right here, and what we've seen already is that we have a stitch repeat which occurs in the round, so it's specifically round number 2 for this one, and that's where we alternate a half double crochet and a bobble. The other thing we need to keep track of though is our stitch pattern repeat that occurs from row to row or round to round. So in this instance, the texture pattern is a combination of round number 1 and round number 2. So we're alternating those over and over until our work measures approximately 20 inches. So we worked the first round before we even saw the technique for the bobble stitch. We just worked round number 2, and so what you're going to do is start off again with round number 1 and then follow that up with round number 2. You'll repeat that over and over until you can measure 20 inches from this bottom edge right here all the way up. You want it to measure 20 inches. Now once you have all of that taken care of, then you can focus your attention on the next round. Now I don't want this round to confuse you at all because really we're just making 1 half double crochet into every single stitch. It's super simple, but it looks a little bit more complicated just because the paragraph is bigger, right? There's more stuff going on. Basically what we're doing in this round is we're marking 2 of the stitches, the one that you see here and here, and that's going to help us in the next step when we start adding on the hood. So we need to mark those 2 stitches so that we have our stopping and our starting point for the hood. So just follow it as you read it here. We're just going to make 1 half double crochet in the first 23 stitches. Nothing tough there, you can do that. Then you'll place your marker on that last stitch. Then you're going to half double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches. Then you'll place your stitch marker on the last one. You'll make 1 half double crochet, and each stitch to the end of the round, you'll join with the slip stitch to fasten everything off, and that's what we're going to pick up next with the hood. Your final round will look like this. You should have 2 stitch markers placed, and it should basically split the middle of the right side or the front of the cocoon. These are going to be our starting and end points for the hood, and so what we can do now is go ahead and fasten off. Now this first row of the hood is going to be pretty simple. What we want to do is find our second stitch marker. So this is the first one that we placed. We're looking for our second one there. We're going to fasten on in this stitch. So if it's easier for you to just stick the hook in there so you can release the stitch marker and not lose your place. And then you'll create a slip knot with your new yarn. Place that loop on your hook, pull it through the stitch. Then we're going to chain 2. Now, since we're not counting the chain 2 at the beginning of a row as a stitch, what we need to do is go ahead and half double crochet in the same space. And this is going to be the first stitch of our round. Now, referring back to the written instructions, you'll see that this first row, all we need to do is make 1 half double crochet into every stitch until we get to this marker here. So we're going to go all the way around over the back, and we're going to stop when we get to this point right here. When you've made it back around to your stitch marker, you want to go ahead and remove that, but don't forget to go ahead and make a half double crochet into that stitch as well. And we're no longer working in rounds anymore, so this marks the end of our first row. Now let's have a look at row number 2 for the hood. Some of the techniques that we're going to pull from this row we're going to use for the remaining rows to finish up our hood, so we're going to focus in on those techniques here. So for row number 2, we're going to go ahead and chain 2, and we're going to make 1 half double crochet in the first stitch. So again, our chain 2 at the beginning of the row does not count as a stitch, so I'm going to find the same place where that chain 2 is coming from, that same stitch, and half double crochet in that space. Then we're going to work a decrease. So a half double crochet 2 together is the decrease that we're going to be working on. And to do that, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over again, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 5 loops on our hook. And what we've done there is we've turned 2 stitches into 1, we've decreased by 1. Now all we need to do is make 1 half double crochet into each of the next 38 stitches. That's going to get us almost to the end of the row. Now let's see that decreasing technique one more time because we're going to use it over and over in the next few rows. We're basically decreasing at the beginning and the end of the row. So I have 3 stitches remaining, and I want to go ahead and make that half double crochet 2 together. So I'll yarn over, insert my hook into the stitch, draw up a loop, yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, draw up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all the loops on my hook. Now the last thing I'll do is make a half double crochet in the last stitch. And just keep in mind that that chain 2 is not counting as a stitch, so I know we're sometimes tempted to want to make a stitch there, but we don't have to in this case, and that wraps up row number 2. Let's have a look at our written instructions one more time because it looks like we have a ton of work left to do. There's a lot of text on the screen here, but again, if we understand the idea, the goal, basically the end result that we're going for, it seems a lot less intimidating. So we've already finished this section right here. We've started the hood, we've gone through the first row, the second row, and you understand how to make the decrease, the half double crochet 2 together. Well, I want to point out that the rest of the information all over here is pretty much a version of what we covered with row 1 and row 2. We do have some differences because the amount in which we're decreasing each round, the placement of those decreases is going to be different, but the techniques are exactly the same. So what I'd encourage you to do is follow through with the remaining rows, rows 3 through 12, and just cross it off as you go. Take it one step at a time, and you'll find a rhythm, and you'll find that it really is nothing to fear, and that all we're doing here is just adding a little bit of length and height to our hood. So after you've finished, we're simply going to fasten off, and the last thing I want to show you here in the studio is how to sew up the hood, how to weave in your ends, and we'll call it done. Now once you've worked up the length of your hood, it should look something like this. We're ready to go ahead and fasten off, so you'll just trim your working yarn, pull that tail through the loop on your hook. Now the last thing we need to do is sew it together. Now what we want to do is make it so the seam is on the underside of the hood, and so what we'll need to do is go ahead and fold it in half just like this. So it's laying right side up. This is the front. Just grab the center and pull it up. That way we're going to sew along this edge, and then we'll just flip it out like this, and then of course it'll be in the correct position. There are various different seaming techniques that you can use for something like this. I personally just like to use a darning needle and a nice long scrap piece of yarn here. And when I make my stitches, I make sure to catch both loops of the stitch on each side. And since we have folded this in half, we will have the same number of stitches on each side. You want to make sure that's the case for you too. That way the hood is seamed up the middle. Then when you get to your last stitch, you want to just go ahead and work that back through and then loop that inside. And basically what we're doing there is creating a loop. So I've worked it back around and then I've ran the end through that loop. So I'm just creating a little knot there. And once I've done that, I'm pulling it through so that way I can tidy up the end here. So I've got my tail from where I fastened off before. And I'm going to use this tail to close up any little gap there. So it's nice and tidy, just run that through. And then we can weave it in on the wrong side of the work. Once you've got that nice and secure, you can go ahead and trim off the tail. We should just have a few tails to weave in now. You want to do the same thing for the rest of those tails. I teased at the beginning of this tutorial that I'd share my little twist to this versatile pattern, and here it is. I was inspired by the green color and texture to turn my cocoon into a little frog, and I can't help but grin as big as this little guy's grin here. I love it so much. You can find the pattern for the eyes and pictorial showing how to attach them on my website. You can find that at bhookedcrochet.com/frogcocoon. I'll see you there.